Okay.
And hello to anyone who is joining with us after the fact. We are so glad that you are following along. Let me know sometime that you are following along, uh, just because it's great to know who's on this journey with us. And today we are maybe going to finish the book of Genesis. Let's see how we do. I think we can maybe romp through the last three chapters, but you never know with us. But first, let us have a prayer. And this is the collect for the human family from our own Book of Common Prayer. And it feels particularly necessary right now. So let us pray. Oh God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us, unite us in bonds of love, and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. Okay. Well, I don't have Elin here today to keep me honest, but I am pretty sure that we are on chapter 48 of Genesis, which means we have three chapters left. Um, for Susie and Eileen, who weren't with us last time, would anyone like to just refresh our memories as to what happened last week? Ellie, were you going to tell us?
I was going to say my cheat sheets upstairs, the Bible. Um,
To
but
say you guys sound like my class.
sorry. Um, but yeah, Jacob slash Israel has, at Joseph's invitation, moved to Egypt, to the land of Goshen, and with about 587 followers and sheep, and goats and female goats and so on. And there was a touching reunion between Joseph and his baby brother Benjamin and all the other brothers. And everybody seems to be living happily ever after in spite of the famine.
Beautiful. Anybody want to add anything else?
Please, because that was not very sensible.
It was sensible. I think
That
that was
was
a
great.
great summary. It's a great summary. Eileen and Susie, are you familiar with the Joseph story?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I can't remember it,
Okay. Well,
but all right, I'll catch up.
you will catch up. And and don't get too attached to it because we're wrapping it up and then we'll start the gospel. So then everyone will be on the same page. Okay. Somebody like to read let's do verses 1 through 16. That seems like a good chunk. Would someone like to read that part of chapter 48 for us?
I will.
Thank you, Susie.
Okay. Hopefully, I'll be able to say all these words.
Just do
Chapter,
it boldly and no one
okay.
will know the difference. Just go for it.
Chapter 48. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, Behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine, as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. And thy issue, which thou begettest after them, shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance. And as for me, when I came from Paddan, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrath, and I buried her there in the way of Ephrath. The same is Bethlehem. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, Who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, They are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God hath shown me also thy seed. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, with whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me till my life fed me all my life long unto this day. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow unto a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when
We're going to stop, but we're going to
Okay.
pause there, Susie. Thank you, because that's a
You're
good.
welcome.
Thank you, thank you. And just, I love, that's the King James, I assume.
You know what? I borrowed it yesterday. It's Holy Bible giant print, King James.
It's wonderful when we
I
have.
couldn't find the other one, Patty. I don't know where it was.
That's fine. And if you want an NRSV, I can get you one. But it's great to use when we have different translations because it helps kind of tease out the meaning because
Okay.
one translation does it one way and another does it the other way. And holding them in tension, we can kind of get a sense because Hebrew is a very spacious language. There are lots of different interpretations, translations, especially ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, because of the vowel pointing wasn't codified at that point. And so there are lots of different ways, as we have learned, that words can be translated. So anyway, that's all to say it's great to hear a different translation. What do you all notice or wonder about in this part of the story? Did anything strike you as maybe a refrain of something we've seen before?
I thought the last time, it's almost in verse 27, it says, and I'm reading from the RSV, it says, thus Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt. And this is kind of the first time that we speak of Israel as sort of a forming of the people.
Exactly.
And then when you go into after verse 48, all is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be fruitful and multiply.
Beautiful. That's right. Because and let me just back up, if I can, to chapter 47 for a second. And yes, this is what Chuck is talking about. So Israel, just as a reminder, is another name for whom?
Jacob.
And heretofore, ever since that scene where Jacob wrestles with the angel, and his name is changed to Israel, up and from that point to now, the text sort of uses Israel and Jacob interchangeably. And remember, there are different narrative strains that have been woven together in the final text that made it into the canon of the Bible. So, one narrative strain calls him Jacob, one calls him Israel, but it's the same guy. up until verse 27. And then Israel becomes the collective. It becomes the name of the people, not just the individual. So that's what Chuck is pointing out here, which is really important. And now we see how that plays out. What else did you notice here?
They're sort of teasing, when Isaac gave the blessing to Esau.
Well, beautiful. Yeah, let's revisit that story for a second. So we're hearkening back to the story of Isaac. And what's Isaac's relationship to Jacob?
His father,
His
isn't he?
father.
His-
Father.
Father. Right. And Jacob has a brother named
Esau.
Esau. They're twins. Who's older?
Esau.
Esau.
By a little bit, by a tiny bit. So Esau is supposed to get the blessing and the birthright, but who steals it?
Jacob.
Jacob.
Puts the skin on his arms and
Yeah, good. So Jacob, for his whole life, has been, and his name. Does anyone remember what his name means? Jacob.
Oh,
Esau
Striver.
is red.
Esau's red. Ellie, what did you say?
The Striver, something like that.
Yeah. So Jacob came out of the womb grasping at Esau's heel. And so
that's right. Yeah.
he's always grasping for that which is not properly his, rightly his. And so, fascinating that here in Jacob's last days, here he is blessing his grandsons. And as Eileen was saying, when Isaac blesses Jacob, he is confused when Jacob puts the animal skin on because Isaac is losing his sight, right? He's old, he's elderly, his own days are waning and his eyesight is going. And so Jacob is able to trick him. And so here we have this echo. Bring me your sons, please, that I may bless them. Now, the eyes of Israel were dim with age, and he could not see well. So we have this echoing back to his own father. And Joseph brings his two sons. And one of the things we've noticed throughout this story is that everybody's doubled. This theme of twos goes throughout the story. And so Joseph also has two sons, not twins, but two sons. And Manasseh's older, Ephraim is a little bit younger. And Jacob, Israel, blesses them. And here we have sort of this lovely benediction. The God before whom my ancestors Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm. And you got to say, Jacob has lived a pretty charmed life. Bless the boys, and in them let my name be perpetuated, in the name of my ancestors Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude on the earth. And of course, later on in scripture, the refrain, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is repeated many, many times, and especially in Exodus when Yahweh reveals God's self to Moses. We hear this over and over again. So Jacob is claiming his place in the lineage along with Abraham and Isaac. Any thoughts about that? Knowing what you know about Jacob?
He seems to not care that much about seniority.
Mm-hmm. Shockingly.
Surprising.
Or he was just like a brother who was stealing that from him,
Exactly.
I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like he's trying to put it right.
Yeah, it does feel that way to me too, Fred. Yeah. So if you think about the arc of Jacob's life, Has he grown? Has he matured? Has he learned anything?
Maybe.
Jury's still out for Jackie.
Yeah, I'm
100% convinced.
still a little leery of all this.
I think
He's
that's wise.
not the most adorable character in the.
No, he got
Darn.
rewarded for being a bad guy.
I know. And yet he is the one from whom the people of Israel take their name. It's fascinating.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And so,
the nation gets named after him.
yeah, just as God promised his grandfather Abraham way back when in chapter 12. So it's fascinating. It's taken a long time, generations later, but the promise to Abraham about possessing the land, being fruitful and multiplying. And of course, we talked last week that they don't possess the land yet, right? Because they're not yet in the promised land. That still is coming. So it's a long, you got to take the long view for this promise, this covenant to be fulfilled. But we see the hand of God perhaps moving throughout this story, or at least the promise of God. Well, shall we continue verses 17 through the end of chapter 48? Would someone like to read this part?
Sure.
Thank you, Fred.
Verse 17.
Yep, 17 to the end, please.
Okay. Now, when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He shall become a great people, and he shall also be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, By you Israel will bless, saying, May God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. And then he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am dying, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow.
Thank you. And let's just see what those. So, okay, we're going to have to look at the Hebrew here. I now give to you one portion or mountain slope. More.
What? Well, the
Let's look.
footnote D or
Being an elastic language. It's okay. Let's see. What? Oops, sorry. What verse was that? That's verse 22. Okay, let's just see what the says. I know. Let's see. One portion. Shechem. Okay, or Shechem. Now that says shoulder or shoulder blade. All right. How are we going to hold all this together? Portion, shoulder, mountain slope. I need some help making sense of that. Does anybody?
What's Alter say?
Yeah. Ellie, do you have Alter in front of you by any chance?
Yes, I'm trying to make sense out of it. That's a huge footnote about just verse 22. The phrase represented here by with single intent is a notorious crux. Previous interpreters may have been misled by assuming it must be the object of the verb have given, meaning literally one shoulder. Evidence elsewhere, blah, blah, blah. Others have proposed without much more warrant than the shape of the shoulder that the word here means mountain slope. Scholars read this as a proper noun, the city of Shechem, encouraged by the fact that the Joseph tribe settled in the vicinity of Shechem. However, that's the wrong form of the word, and far from Jacob having conquered Shechem with his own sword, was horrified by the massacre that his sons perpetrated there. Remember, that's been revenge for Dinah.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why what's his face is not inheriting here.
Simeon.
The very phrase used here, Shechem Ahad, occurs at one other place in the Bible where it's used adverbially as an expression that indicates concerted, unswerving intention and execution, and as such is perfectly appropriate to this legal pronouncement of legacy by Jacob.
Hmm.
Once the phrase is seen as adverbial, the relative clause "what I took" falls into place with grammatical preciseness as the object of the verb have given. And in this reading, no particular city or region need be specified.
You all got that?
No.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Uh,
Just
Very,
read it
very
a few
astute.
more
I don't know
times.
where
Very
you are, but
dense.
that's all right.
Very dense. It's very dense. I'll read to you what my study Bible says, which might be a
Lovely.
little bit easier. It's connected to
A little more
what
concise.
it says. One portion literally means a shoulder height, a play on the name Shechem. Shechem sits near the later tribal borders between Manasseh and Ephraim. Its mention here links the adoption of Joseph's sons with the censure of Simeon and Levi. Joseph was eventually buried there in the book of Joshua. So I think that's enough for us. I think we're good. I think we get the gist. Does anybody have any thoughts about this last paragraph in the chapter, aside from that difficult to parse word of portion or shoulder?
I don't understand why Jacob would decide to put the younger brother before him. I mean,
Joseph?
obviously he was the younger brother.
And
Well,
Is he
look at
just
what
doing-
poor Joseph went through at the hands of his
Is
brother.
he just doing him a favor? I mean, what do you think that is?
Well, Jacob himself is the younger brother,
Right.
as you say. Also, who's Jacob's favorite of his 12 sons?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Benjamin.
Joseph.
And
Benjamin,
Benjamin, who are the two youngest.
because they're both sons of Rachel.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Jacob absolutely has a preference for the younger. And so I'm sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. I apologize. I hate when that happens. He also shall become a people. He also should be great. And I think that word also is instructive there, right? He's not saying that Ephraim is the only one who's going to be great. Manasseh, who is supposed to get the birthright, supposed to get the blessing, also will. But it's almost like the playing field is being leveled a little bit here. That's probably a generous interpretation. Again, Jacob is all about justice for the younger, right? Or preferential treatment. Yeah, exactly. A preferential treatment for the younger. Anything else that strikes you here? Okay, let's move on to 49. And if someone wouldn't mind reading 1 through 28. You know what? Would someone read the whole chapter? It doesn't make sense to break it there. I think it'll read pretty.
I can do that.
Thank you, Ellie. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
Need it
Just gonna-
bigger? Okay.
It's a big nose image here. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather around that I might tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and hear, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my vigor, excelling in rank and excelling in power. Unstable as water, you shall no longer excel because you went up onto your father's bed. Then you defiled it. You went up onto my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. May I never come into their council. May I not be joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and at their whim they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He crouches down. He stretches out like a lion, like a lioness. Who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and the obedience of the peoples is his. Binding his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garment in wine, and his robe in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun shall settle at the shore of the sea. He shall be a haven for ships, and his borders shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to the burden and became a slave at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Gad shall be raided by raiders, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall provide royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears lovely fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers fiercely attacked him. They shot at him and pressed him hard, yet his bow remained taut, and his arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. By the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are stronger than the blessings of the eternal mountains, the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph, on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, blessing each one of them with a suitable blessing. Then he charged them, saying to them, I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my ancestors in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave in the field at Machpelah, near Mamre, in the land of Canaan, in the field that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a burial site. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were purchased from the Hittites. When Jacob ended his charge to his son, he drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people.
Thank you. So, what do you want to focus on here?
As Benjamin's mother, I take offense at ravenous wolf. Actually, trying to feed that boy. You remember, Patty?
I do.
No, but seriously, it's interesting how each of his sons, he sounds like a real father. It's like nobody knows you like I do. And this is what you've done, and this is how it's going to be for you in the future.
And not just for them as individuals, right? Because one of these becomes what?
the entire nation, pretty much.
Yeah, one of the tribes of Israel, right? The 12 tribes of Israel. So, is this, here's my question. Is this observational? Is he, just stating what is, or is it performative language? In other words, does Jacob's blessing become true? Right? What am I trying to say? Does it become
like a prophecy? You're
Is it a
saying?
prophecy?
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Possible. It's like what struck me also was the stanza or verse, whatever. The blessings of your father are stronger than the blessings of the eternal mountains. The
Mhm.
mountings of the everlasting hills, may they be on the head of Joseph, on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. And I think we're supposed to see father there as capitalized.
Mhm.
I'm thinking he's talking about God, the Father, not just himself as their father. I don't know. Or he's speaking as, he's God's instrument and the blessings are what's going to be important in the future and they're going to need them. Yeah.
Well, and if you look at the previous stanza starting, or the previous verse starting at 25, by the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb, the blessings of your father. So he is absolutely, Eileen, he is aligning himself with the God of Abraham and Isaac.
And future generations represented by the breasts and the womb, the women bearing the children, the women feeding the children.
Exactly. And the Hebrew word there is Shaddai, and you've probably all heard El Shaddai before, one of the names of God. What do you notice, just from a literary standpoint, about the way this chapter is constructed?
It is poetry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Beautiful poetry too. Yeah.
And it's actually unusually poetic. I mean, it's set off in a poetic poem format. But we've seen it in other translations where some translations will have the poetic format and others will just run it into the text. But this is poetry.
Yeah.
It's a song.
So this is what my study Bible says. Verses 3 through 27 are a lengthy and ancient poetic composition whose contents concern the era of the judges and the monarchy, which of course are generations yet to come. We have not, we're still in the patriarchal period in Hebrew scripture. We have yet to get to the periods of the judges and the kings. So woven from once independent songs or mottos, it glimpses the tribes of Israel in their early days in Canaan, with occasional references to later history. So this is one of those examples. Remember, when was Genesis finally codified? When was it put together as one text?
And the Babylonian captivity.
Correct. So generations later, when the people of Israel were in exile, so Genesis becomes, remember, it is their Israel's origin story, right? And so this text clearly, is looking back, right? It was written as though it's looking forward, but it's descriptive of what was going on for the people of Israel, for the 12 tribes, and how they developed over time, right? Because as the footnote says, it's descriptive of the people who are living in Canaan. Well, they haven't gotten back to Canaan yet, right? They're still in Egypt and Goshen. So this is a moment where we're reminded of how Genesis came to be, and that this is in fact one very long origin story for the people of Israel. And it is beautiful poetry, absolutely.
I got a question.
Yes.
While you're scrolling, The second half of verse 7 is talking about Simeon and Levi, or I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. These two brothers, the two violent ones. And they sound like kind of creepy people if they're hamstringing oxen. What does that mean?
Good question. My study Bible says Simeon was eventually absorbed into Judah. And again, think about these as the tribe of Simeon and the tribe of Judah, not the individuals. And Levi, perhaps decimated by wars, became the landless Levitical priesthood.
A single person cannot be decimated.
Exactly. Right. So these are the tribes that will be divided. And let's just see for a second. Let's see what the Hebrew says.
Right.
I will disperse them in Jacob.
Ad for a t-shirt. You should have seen it. Not very holy.
Right. Oh, I know. I hate these pop-ups. So it's interesting that Jacob refers to himself by both of his own names there, right? I will disperse them in Jacob, but Jacob becomes the name of the tribe as well, and scatter them in Israel. So once again, they're interchangeable. And I wonder if that's meant to be, a reinforcement by using both names, kind of to hammer home the point. I don't know that that's right, but that's kind of the sense I get. Anything? Someone was going to say something. What about verse 18 just thrown in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't wait very long.
Yeah. So, he's about halfway through his list of sons, and then he pauses, I wait for your salvation, O Lord. So it's interesting, the audience changes, right? Because at first he's talking to his sons and, sort of declaring what's going to happen to them. And then in the midst of all that, there's this pause of, I would say, prayer. He's talking to God. And it's an interesting interjection there. And then he picks up again. Gad
feels himself weakening.
Ellie, does Alter say anything about that verse?
I'm sorry, I was looking at which verse?
18. That interjection, I wait for your salvation, O Lord.
Oh yeah, hang on. Skips it.
Okay. Oh, well, maybe it's just a pause in his speech, in his farewell.
Or maybe it's just just a sorry, the phone's ringing. Maybe it's just a plea for deliverance from Dan being a snake in the road. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't know if y'all heard Fred said, he may feel himself weakening at this point, and that could be because his death is imminent, right? Once, it's a very poetic moment, right? He delivers this speech, this blessing, this final pronouncement, and then he, curls up his legs and dies. And so, yeah, it may be as simple as that. I may be trying to make more of it than it's meant to be.
I've still got a couple more sons to do, so give me another minute, Lord.
He's like, okay, here I go. And so then at the end, what's the significance of this last paragraph? Bury me with my ancestors in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite.
It's just a continuation, the reiteration of what their actual home ground is and why.
Mm-hmm. Mamre in the land of Canaan. And you remember when Sarah died, Abraham made a point of going back to Mamre and buying the burial plot, um, so that he would have a stakehold in the land of Canaan. And then he also was buried there. And as Jacob says, Isaac and Rebekah were buried there. He buried Leah there, his first wife. Where's Rachel buried? Do you remember?
Mhm.
Rachel is buried in Bethlehem, in what becomes Bethlehem. So, she is not buried in Mamre with everybody else. Not Rebecca, Rachel.
For someone who trashed, so many conventions, he seems to be having a deathbed conversion.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? There is a traditional element to this, and it could be, as he's talking about his descendants being fruitful and multiply, it may be that he is
worming his way back into the fold.
Yeah. And he's thinking about legacy. He's thinking about where he stands in the lineage and what the promise has been to his family, right? From his grandfather down to his own descendants. And so it's like he's realigning himself again after quite a sojourn. All right, should we finish Genesis? We've got one chapter to go.
Sure.
All right, let's see. We could do it one of two ways. We could have 3 different readers. There are 3 sections. Or somebody could read the whole thing as a piece. What's your pleasure?
I'll do it. I'll just read the whole thing.
Excellent. Thanks, Chuck. And I'm trying to move this arrow.
That's okay. I'm going to read from mine.
Oh, good. Okay. Excellent. Better yet.
Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, and for so many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die in my tomb, which I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan. There you shall bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray you, and bury my father, and then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of the household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land of the Canaanites saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Therefore, the place named Abel Mizraim, it is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham sought with the field of Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers, all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave us this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Forgive, I pray you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now we pray to you, forgive the transgression of the servants of God your father.'" Joseph wept, and they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Fear not, for I am in the place of God. For am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, and bring it out that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he reassured them and comforted them. So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, and he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, and the children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, who were born upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up to this land, to the land which he swore to Abraham and Isaac and to Jacob." Then Joseph took an oath of the sons of Israel, saying, "God will visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt.
The end. Thank you, Chuck. So what do you think? What strikes you?
A lot of emphasis on embalming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you're in Egypt.
Exactly.
When you do as the Egyptians do.
Wow.
I don't know. I just see, ever since I was a little kid, the brothers in this story bothered me. I mean, well,
It's good.
Patty knows my background, but I have 4 older brothers,
Yeah.
2 of whom love to make my life a misery, and the other 2 would get them to stop. Anyway, even at the end, they're trying to cover their heinies. It's
Of course they are.
forgive us, really. They should. It's the thing to do, but it's still kind of, I mean,
But
they sold the
Joseph
poor
was
guy
so
into
kind.
slavery out of jealousy. It's,
But Joseph was so kind, I thought,
Absolutely.
yes.
to his
Joseph, I
brothers.
think, is almost like a harbinger of Jesus in this way because he's forgiving.
Yes.
He's like, even when he first sees his brothers and recognizes them and they don't recognize him,
Yes.
he could have made their lives a living hell. And he said, "No, let me give them food. My father's hungry. They're hungry." He's like an example for us.
And I think I can't remember if it might have been John a couple of weeks ago talked about hearing in the Joseph story some echoes, or not echoes, but hints, foreshadowing of the prodigal son, right? Because,
That
the
too.
wayward come back, and Joseph opens his arms broadly and welcomes them and cares for them and here forgives them. So yeah, Joseph is very kind to them, as Susie says. And so Joseph is a redemptive character.
He's very New Testament for the Old Testament.
Yes.
What else do you notice or wonder about?
Did Joseph not want to be buried in the, in the ancestral burial place?
Well, yeah, I mean, he does say, bring my bones up with you when you are delivered from this place. He says, let's see, when God comes to you, you shall carry up my bones from here.
How does that translate?
Let's see,
When God comes to you.
verse 25. Let's see.
Or, of course, it says placed in a coffin, but it doesn't say buried.
True. Very true.
I don't know about at this point, but I mean, by Jesus's time, they just sort of put you in a cave
Yeah,
and
it
then
was
saved the bones. After
In a
you
tomb.
brought it away, they saved the bones, what was left.
Exactly.
But that was the Jewish custom to do that in the New Testament. To bury, to just wrap in swaddling and not embalm. Where
Mhm.
in this reading, I was surprised to see the word embalmed. With I can't remember who it was, but he was embalmed, and whereas
Jacob.
Jesus put in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Well, and to Ellie's point, they are in Egypt. So
Right.
they are going to follow the Egyptian custom. But that's hugely helpful, Susie, to think and Fred to think about what becomes Jewish burial practices and what's
yeah.
different from
Because
the
I'm trying to remember if either of my in-laws were actually embalmed, because they had, religious Jewish funerals.
Mhm.
And it was, well,
probably
it
were
died on a Friday. If you died on the Sabbath, you had to wait until the sunset of the day that wasn't the Sabbath. And
But
my
otherwise,
father-in-law died on a Saturday.
They're
but
supposed to be in
otherwise,
the ground for 3 days.
yeah, they
So
need to be buried right
you
away.
don't need to be embalmed under those conditions.
right.
Yeah, I guess that would be it.
So someone was asking me about the translation of, let me just double check.
When God comes to you, that's a
Yeah,
funny phrase.
God comes to you. So that's the first part of 25. Here it says, God will surely take care of you. So it's not, it's a surely will. There's still some doubt to that, as opposed to the translation that sounds pretty declarative. God will come to you. Attend to, muster, number, visit, punish, called into account. So it's interesting. It has both a positive and a negative connotation. For anyone like Susie or Fred or Chuck who have different translations, what does your translation have for verse 25?
I quit reading mine after I realized it was different. So I came to this one, which is much easier to understand.
I agree. Chuck,
This one,
Chuck or Fred
Um,
say.
this one
Now,
says,
the RSV says, God will visit you and you shall carry up the bones.
Okay.
yes.
So it's like this is going to happen,
Mhm.
but it's not like they're dying. The person's dying. It's like they're going to have a vision or something's going to happen with God and them, and that's when they will take the bones up.
And knowing as we do the rest of the story, when do we think that might mean?
The flight out
Exodus.
of Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So-
The altar says, Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, and God will surely single you out and take you up from this land to the land he promised to Isaac and to Jacob. And he made the sons of Israel swear, when God indeed singles you out, you shall take up my bones from this place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's verses 24 and 25.
And
His brothers were pretty old by that time.
yeah. And I just want to fast forward for a minute to the book of Exodus. Let's see. I'm just going to read this last paragraph in the book of Exodus here, chapter 13. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, so that was nearer. For God thought, if the people face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people by the roundabout way of the wilderness bordering the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of the land of Egypt, prepared for battle. And Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had required a solemn oath of the Israelites, saying, God will surely come to you, and then you must carry my bones with you from here. They set out from Succoth and camped at Etham in the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went in front of them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them along the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so that they might travel by day and by night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. So we might get the visual of Moses, carrying the ancestors' bones up out of Egypt toward the promised land. That's a powerful image, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as Joseph had requested. And again, remembering that Genesis was actually written well after the Exodus, well after this had actually come to pass. It could be that somebody was, retrojecting, putting it back into the story, or maybe Joseph did have a sense that this was going to happen someday. Hard to know for sure. Well, as we wrap up, any last thoughts about Genesis? Are you glad you read Genesis?
Yes, and I'm glad we did the whole thing too. We were talking about just doing bits of it.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't, Fred and I have talked about this because we share a feeling that, it's not as deeply theological a book as some of the others we have read. And as we move into the Gospel of Luke next week, we'll feel that distinction. And it's important to have a sense of these origin stories, right? To understand, because this is foundational to the Jewish people and, and to us as Christians. So it's very important to understand all of that. And as we move back into Christian scripture, we'll definitely hear echoes of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob again. So
this is clearly a campfire story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we're here, he would absolutely agree with you on that. And especially that section in chapter, I guess it was 49, that had the poetry. You could really hear people gathered around and reciting the different sons and what's going to become of the tribes of Israel. So, well, kudos. Well done, everybody. You made it through the book of Genesis. Woo-hoo! It took, according to my record, it was 33 sessions, which is pretty fast for us. And it was 50 chapters, so that's really pretty good.
Yeah.
Next week, we will move into the Gospel of Luke, which of course is the gospel which we mainly hear this year in our lectionary. And together, many people in this group have been together as we have read Mark, Matthew, and John. And so Luke is the only gospel we haven't read in this group. So, Susie, you're joining us just at the right time, just as
I love the Gospel of Luke. Unfortunately, all my kids and grandkids will be with me in Disney next Wednesday. So I won't be here. Steve's starting to celebrate his 55th birthday.
Wonderful. Well, you can listen to the recording.
I will.
Not in Disney, but then we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye.
Friday.
Bye.
Sunday.
I will come back the next time you have a Wednesday holiday.
I was going to say, I'll see you in a couple of weeks during winter break.
Yay. Can't wait.
I'll see you Sunday, Patty.
Sounds great.
All right, take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Bye.